Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Glick. And if this is your first time joining us, our show is dedicated to having on individuals associated with the industry, hearing about their origin story, and then also talking about some of the projects that they've been involved with over the years. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Ryan Flint. Ryan is the president and managing partner at HG Manor Real Estate. Ryan, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And, we always start these podcast episodes out the same way. We always dig into the kind of the origin of our guests. And so, from your standpoint, I'm interested to know how you got into real estate. Was it always something that you knew it was going to be your path, or kind of take us back to the beginning and where that all started?
Yeah, so I served an LDS mission, and when I got home, I started as I loved fitness, and my wife and I started a gym, and in that gym, I was a trainer, and I was training more CEOs and kind of your higher end type of people. I knew that wasn't my end all be all because there's really not a lot of money in fitness, at least the way I was doing it. There definitely is now, and people have figured it out. But my father-in-law is a big commercial real estate developer, and I saw his lifestyle. I saw, the I guess the shiny objects back in the day when you're 21 years old, and loved being able to have that freedom. So that always intrigued me. Real estate. I always loved watching real estate shows, and I, just like everybody else, there's always some sort of interest in real estate. If you think about 90% of the millionaires in the world today, they own real estate, and so that captured me quite a bit. And like I said, when I was really young, it was all about the shiny object or whatever. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I started out, I went and got my license. And at that time, we had sold our gym and was trying to figure out what way in real estate I was going to go. I was in real estate school, and I knew I didn't want to sell homes, just because the home realtors, there's a lot of emotions to it. And for me, I wanted to deal with corporations and businesses and those people that I was dealing with when I was training. Um, a lot of them said, "Hey, with your personality and your look and the way that you talk to people, uh, your charm, whatever you want to call it, your work ethic, you would be really good at this." And so I was working for my dad doing special projects, and he had a big warehouse down in Salt Lake City, and said, "Hey, we've got 8 acres in the back. It's zoned industrial. Can you kind of get your feet wet? Help me help my company sell that." My dad was never one to just give handouts, so I had to work for it. And I remember calling one of the industrial brokers in Salt Lake City. I did a lot of research on who it may be. I saw that we had some connections, and called an individual that specialized in industrial real estate, and said, "Hey, come mentor me, teach me, and I'll do all the work. I'll make all the calls. Just kind of help me through the process when we get a buyer on the hook." And we ended up selling it together. And during that time of working on that listing together, he approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to come get your feet wet and work for me at this company?" And the company is the second largest commercial real estate brokerage in the world, called JLL. And I was obviously so gung ho and pumped about it. And as I was at JLL, I sat back and discovered what kind of real estate broker I wanted to be. And what I noticed was there was a huge void in customer service. There was a lot, there's a lot of sharks out there swimming in a big ocean, just kind of, shark eat shark or dog eat
Yeah.
dog, whatever you want to call it. And it was very tenacious and competitive, and in a way it was very condescending. And I sat back and I said, "God, wouldn't it be awesome to be the broker that people or other brokers enjoyed working with, and that when you did a deal and you came to the table with a client, that they would say, 'Oh, this is a real deal, and if it's not a real deal, it's probably not because of Ryan.'" And so I kind of dove in and said, "I want to be the customer service, make that my superpower." And so I did just that. It was a uphill battle, because, they teach you how to be super cutthroat and cut other people out and do double end deals, limited agency here in Utah. And, I felt like for the first 3 or 4 years, I was just fighting against the grain constantly. And no matter what I would do, I would be taught to do it in the adverse. And so holding to my ground, learning from my dad. My dad was a big customer service guy when it came to his business, and he flourished like crazy. Um, I just had to tell myself, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, and be that guy that just loves people, that connects with people, that cheers people on, that whether they wearing your jersey or not, it didn't really matter. Whereas in, big corporations, when I was with JLL and Colliers, you try to use other agents from that shop when you do outside deals. And I started to develop relationships with all sorts of brokers. And so I kind of broke that trend where it wasn't, keep everything in house. It was, hey, let's make sure that we get your client the best person for the job, whether they're with a small shop, a boutique shop, or a big shop. And that's really what has set me apart the last 10 plus years, is the customer service. And today I still thrive and focus on that as part of my business.
Well, I really like that because I mean, I'm also a customer service person because I do think in a lot of different industries out there, there's a void in customer service. And I think over the last probably 3 years or so, since 2020, I think that things have even gotten even worse in the
Hmm.
customer service side because there's been an excuse that people have been leaning on. So, kind of going back to the beginning of your story, you talked about the initial broker that you reached out to kind of learn the process of selling that industrial building. What do you think it was that in that conversation and your reach out to him that allowed you to have a chance? Like, was it your approach? Like, what do you think it was that gave you a chance there?
Well, honestly, the best way to get anybody's attention, especially a top broker, is bringing them a deal. And
Okay.
I had a really sexy deal in Utah. We call it the Northwest Quadrant. It's out by the airport, 8 acres. Peterbilt, the trucking company, ended up buying it. So it was a very desirable listing that any broker, whether top broker or not, would have taken my call and would have wanted to work on that deal, because I did share it. I split it 50-50. I told them, hey, look, you just teach me, you tell me who to call, what to do, and I'll show up, I'll show the land, I'll make all the calls. You just kind of guide me and mentor me. So it was a very expensive way to get one of the top guys to mentor me, but it ended up turning into a job offer. So I obviously did something right, and he saw something in me that stood out.
Nice. And kind of going back even a little bit further back than that, when you talked about starting out in the doing training,
Mhm.
and do you ever look back, or are there any things from those early days that have helped you in your real estate career? Like, were there any like work ethic or anything like that that you felt like you really leaned on as you got into the real estate side?
Absolutely. So as I was telling you, my clientele was, CEOs, business executives, very high end, athletes. And I would get there at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's when my first session was. And being a business owner, there were days I was there till 10 o'clock at night. And so obviously, I learned work ethic growing up, and being on my mission. But that was a very true test of work ethic. And at that time, I wasn't making very much money, because every little bit of money would go back into the business and paying rent, and paying trainers, and you would think, being a business owner, there's a lot in it. I know things have changed over the last 20 years, but at that moment, we were just making X amount per session, and it was just as many sessions as you could get in. What I also learned was, working with that type of clientele, I had to communicate really well, and I had to communicate very honestly and transparently. And it was about telling them what they needed to hear, not necessarily what they wanted to hear. And a lot of times in real estate, there's people that just kind of sugarcoat things, and they tell them what they want to hear, rather than saying, hey, no, this is what you need to hear, whether it's good or not. I'm just going to tell you the truth so that we can then find a solution together. And honestly, that's probably been the biggest lesson and thing that I've taken from it is good communication and treating people with a lot of respect and openness.
Okay. And what keeps you, I guess, in the real estate industry? So you've been in it for a little while now, and like, why stick with it?
I love it. I love it. It makes me happy. I've had so many other opportunities come my way, and to do other things and even do development and investing and run other companies. But there's just something about it that I love it because I'm really good at it and I'm confident in it. And that's a good lesson for people, that if you absolutely love what you do, it's not really a job. And that's how I look at it. And as I've been doing this for over a decade plus, and done really well, I have that freedom to be able to do what I want, when I want, however I want, with whoever I want. And it just feels really good because you look back in those first several years were just constant grind. First in the office, last to go home, 100 calls a day, just getting shut down, having a little bit of success, having good years, bad years. All of it weighs in, but at the end of the day, you always hear and you read, do what you love. And I honestly just love it. And so I've been able to bless a lot of brokers. A lot of agents have come through me and my training, and I've been able to graduate them onto, running their own business and playing a big role in bigger businesses that just at the end of the day, it makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's, you mentioned early on about the kind of that shiny object, right? Because I
Hmm.
think, especially early on when you're starting something, when you're going through those hard times or the times where you're really having to dig deep and get through some of the tougher days. And it's not like everything goes perfect now, but like still back in the early days where you're trying to establish yourself, you're trying to get to the point where you truly can do what you want. I think those are the times where it's really easy to start looking at some of the other shiny objects, and I think a lot of people fall into that trap. I know, you know, several years back I fell into that trap where I'd be like, all right, well, I've done this for 6 months or 1 year, and so now I'm going to look for that next thing that's going to, promise those rewards. They're going to come faster, but then what you realize is that, you know, it really just takes consistent work in the thing that you're doing, and like you said, enjoying finding something that you actually enjoy doing, because that's what's going to keep you around most likely.
Yeah, and real estate's a big momentum business. So if you go hard for a couple of months and then kind of pull off the gas pedal, others will pass you up. And what I learned from a mentor was, take the rear view mirror off of your career, and don't worry about who's behind you. Always just worry about what's in front of you and what you can control. And that's been a really good lesson for me. So like I said, it's a momentum business, and the more momentum you have, the better things come your way just naturally, because you're staying on top of it. Real estate is also, it's not necessarily a transaction business, but it's a relationship business. And I've focused a lot on building relationships, not just for one deal, but in commercial real estate. There's companies that I've done 5 or 10 or 15 or 100 deals with, which is different than, helping somebody buy a home. It might be 1 or 2 times or 3 times during your whole career that you help that family. Whereas businesses, I've done franchisees. I'm working on a deal for 300 locations, and it's a relationship thing. And so, you'll hear me talk a lot about be relational, not necessarily transactional, because when you're relational, the transactions will come. And it's just about treating your client, your customer, that company with a lot of respect and love, and truly lead with love. I know that sounds cliche, but it's a real thing. And then making sure that you have the 3 F's: you follow up, you follow through, and you follow back. And you think about a golf swing. And it's a real thing. There's a lot of people that follow up, they get the deal done, and then they get their commission, and then they never hear about the agent. And then 5 years down the road, the agent looks at some comps and they're like, oh my gosh, I represented this client 5 or 6 years ago and they just bought an $8 million building. I should have been a part of that. Why
Yeah.
not? It's because they didn't follow through and check in on them. Again, it's a customer service thing. And then they didn't follow back with them and say, hey, how can I help you? How's your growth? Like, let's sit down, let's map things out. I've had to downsize people. I've had to get people out of leases, and that's not fun. I've had to do termination agreements and buyouts. That's not fun. But when you help people through that, they see a bigger side of you that's not just their agent. It's like part of their team. There's a lot of times where I've been invited on advisory boards or executive leadership committees, all because of a trust factor and just it thinking outside the box. It's not always about just getting a deal done, getting a commission. It's about really seeing the bigger picture and how you can truly help them.
Yeah, and I guess I want to dig into that momentum and relationships a little bit deeper. So like when you I guess come into each day or you're planning out your day, how are you purposeful about kind of creating that momentum and then also incorporating, that relationship side of the business into your days so that way you can look, you can kind of look ahead and that hey, as long as I continue to execute here. Do you have a certain approach that you take?
I do. I do. A huge part of my business is I plan. I plan very strategically. I plan the night before so that when I get in the office and the phone starts ringing, or I get summoned to certain appointments or buildings, it's not having to backtrack and get unorganized. Being unorganized in this business is probably the worst thing that you could do, and I could speak for every realtor that way. But when I first started the business, I was taught, hey, make a to-do list and just start going through it. And as I started to really excel and understand that to-do list, I changed it. And now I have a hot list of anywhere from 3 to 7 items a day that are absolute, no matter what. If hell freezes over, you've got to get those things done or followed up on, follow through, follow back, whatever it is. Those 3 to 7 things that I can manageably do in one day. Whereas, I've had a list of 100 things and you just look at it and it becomes a super overwhelming. And so that's really helped me a ton is to pick up that hot list and say, okay, here's the 3 to 7 things that I need to do on this particular day in order to get them from first base to second base or second base to third to home. And that really helps it. If you focus on those 3 to 7 things and you take really good notes, for me, I have to have, administrative help. I don't do it on my own. I have a full team behind me, communicating well. That's really where the needle gets pushed forward in my business.
Nice. Well, let's shift gears a little bit to your company. So, HG Manor Real Estate. For those who are listening in, since we have people listening in from across the country, I guess how would you describe what it is that you do?
Yeah, so a commercial and corporate brokerage. We're full service. We do leasing. We help individuals and companies buy, sell, and lease their commercial real estate. That's
Okay.
in a nutshell. HG Manor comes from my business partner. His acronyms are HG from the Holland Group, and my father-in-law, that is my mentor and somebody that I look up to. His company was Manor House and
Okay.
Development, and so I wanted to carry on his legacy, and that's where HG Manor was born. It was a combination of my business partner and kind of what he wanted, and my father-in-law and how much I looked up to him, and being able to carry the family business forward.
Nice. No, that's really cool that you have that meaning behind the name and everything.
Yeah.
So something that we do on the show, and I mentioned this, was around talking about some of the projects that you've been involved in over the years. Now, I know on the brokerage side, it's less about developing land and things like that, but obviously you're involved in some pretty cool projects and making certain things happen. Are there any projects that stand out in your mind, or any deals that stand out in your mind that you'd be able to speak on a little bit and kind of share what makes those so special or so interesting?
Yeah, I mean, in my world, about 95% of what I do, I can't share, but there are some projects that I've absolutely loved and adored working on. If you're from Utah Station Park, with Center Cal Properties was one. I worked on the Hill Air Force Base project called Falcon Hill for a number of years. That was really gratifying. I sold Legend Heels, which was over a $50 million deal. It was very fun. That was actually for my father-in-law. And fun fact is, he I asked him to work, so that I asked him if I could work for him when I got my license and I started in brokerage. I started to actually have a lot of success, and he said no. And I didn't even get a listing for about 6 years, and after I was in the business from him. And so there was no handouts, and it was a really cool story for me to be able to sell one of his biggest assets, and essentially create that retirement for him. Um, and that was called Legend Hills. That was an amazing project that we sold in 2021. And that was probably one of my most proud moments. I've done big industrial deals. I did a deal that was over 1.2 million square feet during COVID. That was the biggest deal ever recorded in the state of Utah from an industrial lease perspective. And then I've helped a lot of corporations, grow their business. And like I said, a lot of them I can't talk about, but my business is very gratifying. And it's not always been gratifying. There's been times where I've had sleepless nights and fought the depression bug and had multiple anxiety attacks, and had to let go of longtime partners that I thought we'd be together forever. And so it's not always sunshine and roses. There are hard trials, but it just comes down to digging deep and getting yourself right and being that person to help others and shine that light.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you shared that, because I think that's important for people to hear too. Because a lot of times, especially in the world we live in today on social media, where we tend to see everybody's like best moments and
Hmm.
retakes of the pictures to get the right angle and get the lighting right and everything like that. And
Yeah,
so I think we are all human, and we do have those moments and everything. So
for sure.
yeah, I think definitely appreciate that. I guess last thing here that we'll wrap up with is the lightning round that we go through here, where I've got 5 questions that I will ask you, and then for each of them, just kind of a quick, 60-second response, your thoughts on them and everything. So, first one on here is, what's the most important trait a leader should have in the real estate industry?
To listen. The best trait a leader could have is to listen, because a lot of times we think that we know it all. And as you lead, you're going to be leading junior agents and newbies, and also agents that think that they know a lot. And the best thing that you can do to properly help them is listen.
Cool. Second one, how do you choose the right partner for a real estate venture or deal? Do you have any quick tips for forming effective partnerships? So it sounds like you've had some experience with this.
Absolutely. I've had multiple partnerships, and it's all built on trust and integrity. I have no problem taking somebody brand new and teaching them, as long as they are coachable, they're trustworthy, and they live with a lot of integrity. I would rather take somebody like that than somebody that's a $10 million a year producer that is a hot shot and a hothead and arrogant. Um, it, it just doesn't go anywhere. It's better just to have that trust and integrity and love. And again, I have a very, very strict policy that you live by certain principles, like I talked about in the customer service department. And there's been times where I've had agents come to me and say, I can't do that. I'm too cutthroat. And as much as you want them, you just wish them the best.
Yeah. All right, third one. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to build their, personal brand in the real estate industry?
To do it, because building your personal brand, starting HG Manor Real Estate, coming from a bigger firm, I was a little bit worried that I was going to lose some clients. And what I realized really quickly is nobody cares what jersey you wear. They care about you. And what I did really well the last 10 plus years is I built a great personal brand that stood out on its own. And I never needed the brokerage to support my personal brand. It stood out alone. So my biggest advice is, don't be afraid, just do it, and know that he evolves over time. My personal brand has evolved probably 6 or 7 times over the last 13 or 14 years. And just know it doesn't need to be perfect on day one just to do it. And
Nice.
have fun with it.
Yeah. All right, fourth one here. So, what's the most surprising real estate trend that you've noticed in the past year? Anything that stands out?
Honestly, that what stands out to me is I can't believe that companies are still doing work from home. I think that's the craziest thing in the world because culture is everything in business. And I've seen companies that were on fire pre-COVID, even though they got acquired by bigger venture capital firms that might think a different way. But I've really seen companies become disrupted in their culture by working from home. And I think getting into the office and rubbing shoulders and learning from others real FaceTime helps business tremendously. So I'm really surprised that there are still companies working from home. I know that there's certain roles like customer service and calling and stuff that may be appropriate, but as a leader or an executive level, working from home, I think is probably not very good.
Yeah, yeah, I would echo that. I think that's something that I 100% see, and it does surprise me. And I see the culture issues that are happening in some of these companies too. So
Me too.
spot on there. All right, last one. What's one thing that you do daily to improve your professional skills?
I'm going to do the two-part. I plan. That's really important. But the thing that has set me apart in my life is I get my body right. I work out super hard. I am very motivated to make sure that I eat the right food, that I work out every day. It's a non-negotiable for me. And honestly, when I work out and I feel good and I'm putting good nutrition into my body, it is the biggest flex that you can do because my business, there's a lot of first impressions. And when you show up and you're sharp and you're dressed up and you look good and you feel good, people can sense it more than anything. You think about Jeff Bezos, right? When Jeff Bezos got divorced, he got ripped.
Hmm.
And he is a totally different specimen with Amazon than he was before. Money is people think is a flex, but when you have an executive that is in shape, it takes it to a whole nother level because they think across the table, God, if he can take that good care of his body and his health and he cares about it, just think what he's going to do for my property. So a lot of people overlook that, but I'll tell you what, when I am, and I've been so busy where it's like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I've never been, overweight or sloppy or anything like that, but I've definitely put my health as a second priority to money or business or whatever. And that is honestly the top priority is I get my head right. I get myself right because when I get myself right, I shine and I help others around me and people meditate from that.
Yeah, I love that. Nobody's ever mentioned that before on here, and it's amazing because I do think on the health side of things and the fitness side of things and like how you present yourself, it's one of those things that you can't buy. Like
Nope.
you can't spend money to get yourself like to look that certain way. So people automatically know what effort went into doing that. And I think
Yep.
some people will kid themselves and say that it's easy for them or it's easy for them, which in some cases maybe some things do come quicker. Some people have to work harder, but regardless, it takes work to get there, and then to maintain also takes work. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's something I haven't heard anybody bring up before on here.
Yeah. I get asked that a lot, honestly, man. And there are certain parts of my business that are important. But if I get my workout in and I eat really well, my mind is so sharp, and I feel like I get 100 times more done in the day. And my confidence level, I think this is really important, is my confidence level in myself is at 100% rather than at 50%. Like I said, I've never really been overweight. I've never been sluggish. I've never not, gotten ready or worn nice things. I've never not cared about myself, but I have put it second priority. And when I do put it first priority, it's crazy the amount the amount of success more that I have, and the energy and the peace and the happiness and the certainty and confidence in myself that I have. So I think that needs to not be taken lightly, and that goes for anybody in any business. You think about, even my dad is starting to lose weight and get into shape, and he's retired, and he tells me, "God, if I would have only done this when I was 35 or 30 or 25 or even 45, I can't even imagine how much more business I would have done." And he's dang right.
Yeah.
So it is super important.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, I guess to wrap up here, for those listening in, what's the best way for people to connect with you personally or to connect with your company?
Yeah, I mean, you can look up hgmanor.com. That's where we're at. We serve all 50 states. We are a full service commercial real estate company. You can find me online. You can Google me, or you can look at my Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not too hard to not find, and so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll put all those links on the show notes page for those of you listening in. You can find
Yeah, I
the links
appreciate that,
links
Ryan.
there. And yeah, with that said, the last thing that I'll just mention here for those of you listening in is that if you've been enjoying the show, just take some time, leave us a rating and review on the podcasting platforms. It helps us be found by other people who are looking for podcasts in this space. So takes 1 to 2 minutes. It won't take much time. So we'd really appreciate you doing that. And with that said, that is all for this show. So we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.